In this video, we're going to continue to discuss major media effects theory. So let's go ahead and let's hop right in by talking about agenda setting theory. So what is agenda setting theory? It suggests that the mass media determines the issues the public considers important. When I say agenda setting in this circumstance, I don't mean motivation, though there can be motivation involved. I do not mean motivation when I say agenda here. Think of it more in terms of a business agenda, a business meeting agenda, where we're listing the topics that are to be discussed. Agenda setting in this case is a lot like gatekeeping that we talked about in Module 1. The news organizations hand select which topics or stories are going to be covered that day. That's what agenda setting is the news organizations hand select which stories they're going to run. Based on which stories they run, you consider to be that story to be of greater or lesser importance to your day. The media focus our attention by choosing how much coverage a story is given. So they hand select the stories that are to be covered, which ones aren't to be covered, and how much coverage a story gets. It is very difficult to turn on the TV. If you see a news story covered over and over and over again, it's very difficult to not begin to assume that that news story is very, very important. Otherwise, why would we be covering it over and over and over again if it wasn't very, very important? The media doesn't tell us what to think. It tells us what to think about. This quote often goes with this theory, this concept that while the media may not move the needle in terms of our opinion, it can definitely force us to think about a thing, as it were. All right, let's move on to our next theory, uses of gratification. Okay, this kind of works counter to direct effects theory, and this takes away from passive viewing or a passive audience into an active audience. It suggests that people actively seek out specific media to fulfill specific needs. Kind of inspired by Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The concept, though, that in your day you have specific needs, those needs have to be fulfilled, and we often look to media to fulfill those. It identified four categories: diversion, personal identity, surveillance, and personal relationship. Um, so, for example, I myself actually, I love YouTube videos. I watch tons of YouTube videos. This is referred to as surveillance. I watch them because it satisfies my level of information on things. I've learned how to fix things around the house. I've learned a lot of things from watching YouTubes, and a lot of it's unnecessarily useless information, as it were. So some of it's useful, some of it's useless, but I find myself constantly curious. And so a good portion of my day, I find myself watching YouTube videos to kind of fulfill that kind of need in my life, the need for to fulfill that curiosity. Some of you guys may play video games to just sort of escape the day as a diversion. Some of you may watch reality TV a lot of the time, or social media for some form of interaction and connections with others. And you may read books or watch movies to help you understand personal relationships and personal identities and things like that. So the concept is that when we go to mass media, we don't just haphazardly do it. We turn on the television program because for a reason. We turn on it because one of these things need to be met. We are not feeling we feel like we need a personal relationship. We need that sort of sense of connection there, or maybe I feel bored and I need the diversion, or perhaps I need a little bit better understanding about my place in the world, or something of that nature. Third person effects theory. This one is really fun, very personal. It suggests that we tend to think advertising propaganda is effective on others, but we believe it has little effect on us. so, if we think about, we turn on the television and we see advertisements, propaganda, political speeches, news stories. We see all these things. We make big assumptions. We may greatly overestimate the impact the media message has on the masses. So let's say, for instance, when we got to the pandemic and there was news stories about not having toilet paper in the stores, we just assumed, well, of course, everybody out there is freaking out about toilet paper, not me. I'm not worried about it. But since they're all going to go out and raid the shelves because they're believing this. I guess I better. So we underestimate the impact the mass media on us, but we may be overestimating the impact the media message has on the masses, as it were. Definitely plays a huge role in altering maybe our behaviors based on some of these miscalculations, as well as our opinions of others and some of our biases towards others. Certainly hasn't This third person effects theory certainly has not helped with some of that, as it were. Okay, spiral of silence. This is a pretty simple one. The thought is that if you hold a minority opinion, you'll often keep it to yourself to prevent yourself from being socially isolated, from being considered the odd man out, I guess. Um, an example of this, maybe voters are less likely to share who they voted for or their opinions if their candidate is perceived to be unpopular. Nixon coined the phrase the silent majority in the late 60s, this concept that you have tons of people who would vote for a person, but they don't want to tell anybody that they secretly wanted to vote for that person. The 2016 Trump election is a good example of this, where people were kind of caught off guard because they assumed that nobody was going to vote for him because nobody was saying they were going to vote for him, and yet they showed out in droves to vote for him. So that spiral of silence, we are afraid essentially when it comes to talking about things or whatever, we are afraid to allow others to know that we are in the minority, that we maybe don't hold the same beliefs, values, or norms that others do. So we often hold this. The last major theory I want to talk about is cultivation theory, which is a fun one. It usually focuses most heavily on television. The studies usually evolve around television. It suggests that heavy exposure to media cultivates an illusionary perception of reality. In other words, if you watch enough TV, you're going to become a little warped. Your view on the world is going to become a little warped. If you watch too much, this is how this differs from direct effects theory. Direct effects theory say that if you watch a media message, you're going to react predictably. Cultivation theory says if you watch a ton of media messages of a similar type, you're going to believe a certain thing. In other words, and mean world syndrome is probably the one of the most studied of these cultivation theory, probably because it's fun. It suggests that heavy TV exposure leads to viewers believing the world is a much more dangerous place than it is in reality. Many of us fear that right now we are in a more dangerous time than ever, that the world is a more violent place than ever. And yet, when we look at our violent crime rates since the 1990s, we've seen nothing but fewer and fewer violent crimes. And so there's this sort of irrational feeling that the more we watch the TV, the more irrational we become because of what we're presented, perhaps. The more we watch TV, the more dangerous we are going to feel the world is. The less likely we are going to get out of the house and just walk down the streets to get from point A to point B because we're afraid X, Y, or Z is going to happen to us. That is mean world syndrome in a nutshell. Cultivation theory essentially is the idea that if you watch enough of a thing, if you do enough of a thing, video game wise, if you are a part of a thing long enough, your view of the world will become a little warped.